Hello, this is Lisa Harrison, and today I am speaking with Amariah Marra, the author of Keys to Soul Evolution, and a channel for a collective of beings who go by the name of, is it Simion?
Yes, it is.
Simion. Well, welcome, Amariah.
Thank you.
Thank you. It, I don't mean to be crude, but it sounds like you're talking to a bunch of monkeys. And I was wondering whether there was a completely different pronunciation of that, but it is Simion.
Yes, Simion. Well, that's what I received, and it sounded right to me. They actually spelled it out because when I first connected with them, it was in a meditative state,
Hmm.
and I basically saw the letters, and I guess I received, I consider it like a telepathy.
Hmm.
I'm receiving the energy and then in translating it into my language. So I saw the letters, they kind of spelled it out so to make sure I had it correctly. And I received the energy of the name. So, and I pronounced it Simeon. And so that's how I continue to pronounce it. I know there's a name Simeon spelled with an E-O-N, like a biblical name, but, since I was given to me with the I, and I actually sort of translated it to a meaning of similar to ions because they speak about being energetic beings, pure
Hmm.
energy from beginning to end. They were never physical beings. So that's how I think of it. Just like sim as in similar to ions as an energy form.
Lovely. Okay. So just, I do have a whole bunch of questions, and I'm not sure what's appropriate to ask you and what's appropriate to ask Simeon, but we'll see how we go. And I just
Okay.
firstly wanted to just to get a bit more of your background. I mean, have you always had, whether we call them psychic or sort of extrasensory sort of gifts, or is this new for you?
Well, it was new for me. I didn't consider myself especially psychic. Maybe intuitive and interested in metaphysics and all things kind of out there and spirituals from a very young age. And kind of had knowings, but I thought they were normal. Knowings about like where humanity was at and why we weren't healing ourselves and that sort of thing at a very young age.
Hmm.
And I knew there was more to the universe than we are experiencing right now in our physical reality. So I had that sort of knowing. And as I spoke with lots of other individuals on the planet as a young child, realized that not everybody had that sensitivity and that sense of knowing something beyond. But other than that, I didn't consider myself to be psychic. This really didn't happen. It didn't happen until 2005, which isn't that long ago. And I didn't really come out with this information until I finished bringing the information from the book, Keys to Soul Evolution, forward, until I completed the entire book, translating it from Simian, the Evolutionary Collective, to the written form. And that was end of 2009. So really, I didn't even go public and start relaying this information publicly, whether it be actual channeling, auditory, verbally, or just whatever else that came with it, doing a lot of typed readings and whatnot until then. So really, it's pretty recent, and it's a constant discovery process for me. Because when I went to do that first meditation to meet my guides, I was looking for information about my purpose in life because I was in a state of consciousness where I realized that I had everything I could possibly want, and what was the meaning of it all? And I felt like I either wanted to have meaning and live a purposeful life, or I didn't want to be here anymore.
Hmm.
That's the kind of state of mind. I was in this sort of, and I would, you could call it desperation, but it was more, okay, I need an answer here. And I want to do something purposeful. So I had this intention, this very strong intention that I wanted to live a purposeful life. And it just came to me one morning that I should be channeling. I had no idea what exactly that would mean for me. I was thinking I would meet my guides and they'd tell me something about what my purpose was. And, ironically, it turned out that my purpose was to be channeling. So you never know. But
So you
so the
actually
first
did,
time I went,
sorry,
go
you
ahead.
did sit down with an intent to connect with initial, well, what you thought would be your higher self or your
Yes,
guides, but it was with an
right.
intent to channel.
Yes.
Do you think
And
that's
I got a
important?
book on it and I yeah, I had that intention. And I was very open to what I would receive. And that is important also. Because one, I knew I wanted to find out my purpose. And I knew that I was going to, I put myself in a state of mind where I was completely open to what I would receive and that I was going to accept it. And that is really important for anyone to consider and contemplate when they're thinking about their life and what it is that they want to do and asking questions of any spiritual aspect of ourselves or the universe, is that go with the intention to actually get an answer and to accept it. Because what that means is that my consciousness was open. And if you go in with all this kinds of doubt and fear and uncertainty, then that's what you're going to get.
Well, there's certainly a lot of stories out there about people who have connected and are channeling beings that they believe to be, love and light, only to find out at some later point that they were really being manipulated and conned by somebody else or something else. So fear and apprehension, I can certainly understand. Have you ever doubted who you're talking to? Have you ever questioned it?
I haven't questioned the intent and the energy that comes through. And that's the most important part, I think. I don't know, this thing from that thing, honestly, because I'm still coming from a very earthly perspective, and I'm limited by that, like all of us. And I'm receiving information energetically, and I'm translating it. I don't know. Basically, I look at it as we don't know anything for sure.
Yeah.
So for me to say, oh, I know for absolutely sure, who this is and where they're coming from, and I don't say that ever. What I do say is that I can feel the energy and I can feel the intention. And the information speaks for itself. None of the information comes through as manipulative or telling you what to do in any way. It never comes through like that. And I think that's one of the determining factors. Like, are you being told answers directly and that you should do this with your life and that, you better think of something because you're being threatened, and you whatever. I think you can tell by one, the energy of the feeling of the information, the vibe, so to speak, and certainly how the information is presented to you and what's the quality of it. Because these beings that I connect with never tell you what to do, and they're always incredibly encouraging of your independence in your own spirit and becoming connected yourself to your own reality and the understanding that we are the creators of it, and that it is our consciousness that creates everything. And so even in that, yes, every single experience that we have, and that none of us are victims. So as soon as you start feeling any kind of victimhood, that's question that for
Absolutely.
sure.
So how has this impacted you in your personal life, but also in your own development of your own consciousness, not separate to having the ability to connect with them? What else has happened for you?
Well, it's a journey for me, unbelievably, because it's kind of interesting place to be in, because I'm receiving all this amazing information that is beyond my present state of consciousness and my present state of development even. So while I'm speaking this information and I'm feeling often the energy behind it, which is amazing to experience, because when I'm channeling or receiving and relaying, I feel so much more expanded than I am.
Right.
And so that energy that goes with it is just so confounding, I guess you could say, for me. And so I'm still learning from what I actually am relaying to people. And that's a funny place to be, because I'm not as developed as the information that's coming through.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily understand it. And I don't necessarily, my ego identity doesn't necessarily agree sometimes. I mean, I'm actually in the background. Sometimes I'll say, what? And I hear myself saying, wait a minute. And then no one's going to get that. When I first started receiving the information, because it was pretty bold from the very beginning that we have this message for humanity, about this shifting consciousness and where we're going and who we really are. And that was huge to have
Yes.
to process, And some of it I didn't even believe. Like they were saying that, oh, we're about to evolve into this new state of being and we're going to start experiencing activation of different abilities that are higher level abilities, like what we might call psychic and extrasensory senses and whatnot. And I thought, no, that's not going to happen. That's really like wishful thinking or something. So I didn't even believe it. And then when I put the information out there and people started to come to me relating to it on a very personal level, saying, oh, all of this is happening to me and I didn't know what it was. And I'm experiencing this, that, and the other that was way beyond even what I've experienced in some cases, and just different for different people, that I started saying, wait a minute, maybe there is something to all of this. So my point is to say that my development is, I'm developing at the same or along with many of the people that are reading the material and experiencing the material. But on the other hand, it has awakened me to a whole new world of experience and a whole new level of thinking, realizing that, wow, there really is more out there. And it's kind of hard not to think that way when you have all this information coming through.
So you basically have to turn around and look at the information objectively the same way anybody else does that comes across it. And there isn't an automatic assimilation of the information just because it's come through you.
Exactly. I wish.
How frustrating. Yes.
I wish I could just assimilate it and be it and be what they recommend, but it's a process for me as well.
And what are they recommending? I had a look at a message that they put up for August, and I was I laughed all the way through it because for probably the last 3 or 4 weeks, started in July, that absolutely what they were talking about, which was all of we're being confronted so much now with our old programs, with the subconscious learned programs of behavior. And it's been coming up for me, it's been coming up for those around me physically, it's been coming up for those around that I deal with online. And it's smack in our faces now. It's like, in this moment, are you reacting based on an old program, or are you acting out of your heart authentically? And we're just given opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to break those habits at the moment.
Right.
And
we can take it or leave it. And it's so true. And we have right now, the power is within us. And at any moment we can release it. But we're being faced with it so that we can release it. And especially on that emotional level, it's right now. I think it's powerful, and it's also the power of, we have the individual choice. So the power is within us, which is a nice thing to realize. Yes,
but unfortunately, it's often not until your life becomes a comedy of errors that you can look back and go, oh, hang on, there's a pattern here. we don't notice it the first few times.
Yeah, and Simion talks about that a lot, about how, we wish you would see your whole life as a metaphor, because these things are happening all for a reason, and they see it as as a poetry of our experience. And it all has meaning, and they're always saying, well, don't you see that every single thing has meaning? We brush it all off, and we take things for granted, and we don't look at the greater meaning within the so-called struggles of our life. Well, if we did, we would see them more clearly, and we wouldn't. They also say you wouldn't have to be hit on the head with a hammer so often if you would take the moment to actually take advantage of your adversities instead of, fighting against them.
Well, I think a lot of us think that we're only consciously creating our life when we're consciously creating our life, not that we're doing it all the time subconsciously. It's just the way things are, and it's not just in those moments where you sit and meditate and do your affirmations or whatever it is you do that you're creating. You're creating when you're doing the
Right.
dishes, you're creating when you're in the shower, you're creating when you're watching television, you're creating in all of those moments as well.
Right. And Simion tries to help us recognize that, to be more aware of that fact. And so that we're not doing it so subconsciously. And to wake up in those moments when we are reactive and say, wait a minute, I have the ability right now to change this creation that I'm, full-fledged into.
Mm. So when it gets to, there's quite a lot of information on your website, which is Simion 7D.
Yes.
Yes. And about this year. And you're the only other person that I've come across who talks about the date of the 12th of the 12th. I don't know if you've heard Anthony Kane at all. Do you know Anthony Kane?
No, I do not.
He's a relative of Martin Luther King, and he's also in
Okay.
contact with some interdimensional beings, and he talks about the
Nice.
12th of December as well, in the same way that it's a gateway. So can you talk a little
Interesting.
bit about this time frame of between the
Yeah. Well,
12th and the
firstly,
21st?
the 12th. They specify the importance of dates because they are markers for us to awaken ourselves. And to collectively focus. And that they see as an opportunity for us. It's a gateway opportunity, 12, 12, 12. The energy, they talk about the energy of the numerology. They talk about the energy, in the cosmos, astrologically and whatnot. So putting all that together, and that it's leading up to this already significant date of December 21 at the winter solstice and whatnot, and that has been basically, they say, marked in time purposefully to awaken us, or to activate the idea of awakening, at least. And so that they want us to focus on 12, 12, 12 as our opening, our door opening, so that when we get to December 21, where there's all this focus of energy in our consciousness, to that opening the door and then looking out and deciding what we want to see on December 21. Because then once that activates, then the possibilities for our future are before us. And what we think about on 12, 12, 12 and are involved in then with our consciousness will be what we're going to see out that window, the possibilities that we're going to start creating. Because that December 21st is just the window. It's just the peak. And then all the fun begins, basically, for us to be creating what we're going to see out that window, what we're going to into as we create through that window, if you understand what I mean. So that window is sort of our vision of our future. So that's why they want us to focus on 12, 12, 12 as a way to prepare, really, as to prepare the opening of December 21st.
So the 12th of the 12th is our opportunity to put focus and energy into what we want to see through the window on the 21st.
Exactly. And then to start really, basically they want us to take this as a bridge, the 12, 12, 12 as the bridge, like the bridge of no return. Where do you want to be going when it comes to December 21st? Where's the highway going to be leading? What do you want to see on the other side of that bridge? So what you create as your bridge is important.
Okay, so this is where things get interesting. This is where the tires meet the road kind of thing, because so many different concepts about what may happen on that date and what may not happen on that date and what will happen after that date. Do you or does Simion ever talk about the idea of the Earth splitting, the sort of 3D version and 5D version, or is it 7 billion different versions, because there's 7 billion different souls on this planet?
Right. Well, that's a really big trick question because there's so many angles to look at this from. But they do speak about a juxtaposition that's happening right now of two different perspectives of our future. And that they will be, in a sense, those that are thinking they call it 4D, they say it doesn't matter, you can call it 5D, they say the next dimension of our awareness, that and the planets, that there'll be those that will be moving into that, and that there will be those that are left behind. And so that into a 3D reality that may not be very fun, is what they say.
So
If
when
you
we talk
actually stay
about,
on a 3D Earth, it's not going to be a great experience. But see, you have to think multidimensionally when you think this way, when you think about this concept, because if you don't, it's almost impossible to fathom the idea that, oh, there's two different realities. Well, you have to understand that there's many realities that are always happening from, if you look at out of time, out of the sequential time perspective. Every thought we have creates a new parallel universe, so to speak. That's what they say. But now we have this opportunity to create this global new reality that wasn't there before, you see? And it depends on how we think as to what that reality will be like. So they give this analogy in the Keys to Soul Evolution about there being like 10 major, as an example, 10 major probable realities for planet Earth.
mm-hmm.
There's millions of smaller ones, but they say, okay, let's say there's about 10 that are major for events that are changing, that change the Earth. So there's like 10 major realities, so to speak, of planet Earth. And in constant flux. This event of December 21, 2012, or this period of time, I don't want to say one date particularly, but this period of time when we have an opportunity to let go of the lowest form of that reality, so to speak, or the lowest forms of the 1 to 10, and create an 11, 12, 13 reality, or just even an 11, that wasn't there before. And that requires a whole total shift in consciousness. It requires new thoughts. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because no reality has been created unless it's been thought of first. And the stronger the thought, the stronger the reality. And now it's a collective opportunity to create a whole new world reality. But it depends on what we are thinking, how that's created. And it wasn't there before. It's a new octave.
And it wasn't there before.
Does that make sense at any level?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I think you've just said something that's going to fry a few neurons. But
I know it fries mine. But you have to think of it outside of time, and that's part of where we're going. That fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional, whatever you might call it, next reality is that we are not confined by consecutive time in the perspective of that. It no longer is one thing happens after the next, because we see beyond that and we recognize that we can change our past and we can change our future within our present.
I'm just
Another
trying
thing
to see,
mind boggle us all.
Yeah, I'm trying to see where what I believed up until 2 minutes ago and what you just said is actually whether they can go together, whether they enhance one another. Because I guess my thinking of late, I always call them my working hypotheses until it gets to a point where I know it.
Right.
Is that because I wasn't getting any sense of connection to the concept of, we've evolved and grown and created and sort of down through the different densities till we hit third, and now we're going to turn around and go back again. That to me was counter to the way the creation works. So what felt right for me was that here we are in this sort of very dense 3D reality, and what we're doing is drawing down the higher, lighter frequencies. And with that comes what we conceive of as the abilities that we actually have in these lighter densities. And I think what you're saying actually goes along with that, because that in itself is creating something new. If we're merging 5D, 4D and 3D, we are going to create something new again. It's not going to be strictly 3D anymore, and it's not going to be strictly 5D. It's going to be a merging of the two. Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, no, yeah, you're thinking out loud.
thinking out loud here. Yeah. um,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's a very good way of thinking about it, and also the fact that that changing of octave means lightening the frequency,
Mm.
and all these beings that are communicating with us from lighter dimensions are helping us to recognize that and to understand what that's like to be of a lighter frequency. And we're actually changing molecularly and in every way. It's not just our consciousness in terms of just our thinking, in other words. I mean, that thinking changes us physically. And we're actually becoming a lighter frequency, less dense being when we do this.
Mm.
And Simion talks about it as an octave of awareness shift. Everything is already light, and a part of the whole source of consciousness universe. Universe is the source of all consciousness. They go together. See, they're already there, one being, and that we're all a part of, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in this, where we are at as life forms on this planet, is we're not aware of that yet. So basically, it is just about becoming more aware of that bigger picture. And as you become more aware of that bigger picture, you have less defining factors in your life. You're less defined by time, you're less defined by gravity, you're less defined by physical existence, you're less defined by death. And afterlife, they merge. Your soul is not separate. You don't see your physical life as separate from your soul energy. It becomes one. And that is the perspective from all of these various beings, because since communicating with Simion, I've connected with all kinds of other beings. I've learned that I can pretty much connect with, seems like, just about any other being in the universe by my intention, which is kind of bizarre, but it's very interesting. That these higher beings, someone we might call ETs or other dimensional beings, even angels and elemental beings, they have a perspective of that's higher than ours, or more aware than ours, in that they no longer have a need to decide to incarnate and die and then have their soul decision about, okay, what am I going to be next? This is much more conscious for them. They don't need to have the death experience. They'll just decide, okay, I'm going to go do this new experience. Mm-hmm. And they may even decide to put just aspects of their soul into our reality, which is happening a lot right now. Is that there's these beings have come from all over, we call them star seeds or the star people, whatever. Yep. That souls that actually decided to help with this process that we're going through, this evolution. And so there's aspects of their soul, only aspects, because if they put their whole self into one of us, it would just fry us. And I guess it wouldn't be much point of it. Yeah. I don't know. So there's aspect of our higher selves, or that are often from many other places. Now, there's also some that are born and raised, so to speak, on planet Earth. So they're Earth souls and evolve with Earth and are very connected to the Earth energy and the evolution of Earth. It's an interesting experience. Once I start the way I got into connecting with all these other beings was through doing personal sessions, which I didn't want to do because Simion's message was about personal empowerment, and I didn't want to be like the person, the psychic that you go to answer your questions about life constantly. I didn't want that dependency. But I did it for a few friends, and what ended up happening was their guides came through, or their higher self, instead of Simion, and gave them information about their own soul purpose, where they came from, and what they're doing here, and their journey, basically, and on a higher level perspective, not from a perspective of often past lives were important, but not always. Mostly it was on a much bigger, broader view of who they were as a soul. And that's how I started connecting with all these other beings. And now, since I've done so many of them, they've been so interesting. I'm putting them together in a book that will relay all the different beings and where they're coming from, and also a lot of that personal guidance, because the personal guidance is so useful for all of us on so many different levels.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they're talking about maybe a person's journey, everybody asks about finances, for example. So the information that comes to from these various beings about what that means and what we should really be focusing on, and is useful for anyone.
So when I've got a note here that you've spoken to Arcturians, Syrian felines, Zeta reticulans.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got some questions around that, in that I can get my head around interdimensional beings.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got a question in regards to the typical ET as being another 3D being from a different part of the universe, galaxy, solar system, creation somewhere, and traveling here in a physical sense. Do you?
Okay.
What else? Are you aware of what else is out there at the 3D level beyond Earth?
I have to tell you, mostly what I connect with is higher dimensional, because once a being gets to a certain, it requires them to get to a certain level of understanding and consciousness in order to communicate with me.
Well, I can imagine you wouldn't be able to communicate with other three-dimensional beings because they'd be somewhat in the same boat we're in.
Right. They're very similar, or some of them have developed very different. I have connected with other higher beings that talk about a particular person's experience as being 3D on another planet or another galaxy. So I know I get the secondhand report, and so to speak.
Yes.
They've been that, and this is where they came from, and this is how that society evolved. I get information like that. Like, this is how you evolved on this planet, and so your perspective is here, and that relates to the person's life now, which is fascinating in itself. But I don't communicate with those because they're like the same boat, like you said, we are. They haven't reached the level of awareness where they understand that they're connected with everything in the universe, and that their consciousness has the power to transcend physical limits and can travel across the universe into different time zones and different time realities and whatnot. So what I've communicated with is the next level up, which I'm terming fourth dimension, and up to, actually the highest dimension and personal levels I've connected with I think is ninth. But that doesn't mean that they're not higher dimensional beings from that point. And that there's a whole nother discussion to go into on what these levels mean, because they're not just like higher necessarily. They're sort of, once you get to a certain octave, maybe fourth and fifth, I think, they're pretty instrumental into change, the awakening level of those realities.
I've actually stopped calling them higher because it gives it gives us the impression that they're greater than us, or
right.
Yeah.
It's not. I like to see it as octaves of awareness. So. Yeah, but there needs to be a certain awareness in order to understand and communicate with various levels in the universe. But they say, they don't think of it as higher or lower when they speak about them. And they say that, well, sixth is just different than seventh. It's a different perspective. But it's sort of like once you get into fourth, you start, our next octave, and you start seeing that, okay, you don't have to be limited by the physical and time reality. Then everything just opens up. Right. So then it's a matter of, okay, well, do I want to, be in a kind of sixth dimensional perspective, or do I want to be in a seventh or an eighth? It's like that.
So the leap from 3 to 4 is huge, but from 4 on up, it's just subtle.
That's what it sounds gradient. Like to me. That's what it feels like. It's hard for us to comprehend what those subtle gradients might be. One being in the sixth dimension talked about it as being, we could look at it as like our chakras of energy. So it's sort of like different variations of energy and perspective. And so somebody from a sixth dimensional perspective, they said, would be very visionary in their reality. Like you can associate that with a third eye perspective, like seeing beyond and creating in a sort of a visionary world. I can't even explain it. It doesn't do it justice.
if our consciousness creates everything, and we have different, how can I put this, different collectives going on at the moment. We've got the collective of those that we consider the Dark Ones, the Cabal, and they have, their collective agenda for what they want to see happen. We've got people like yourself who are actively, consciously living in a state of awareness and have hold a very positive vision about where we want to go. Then you've got people who are completely unaware of any of it and living their lives unconsciously.
Right.
Is it simply a matter of percentages as to what wins out here, or is it that each of these different collectives end up with exactly what they put their energy into? It's just one of those different timelines, or different realities, alternate realities?
It's almost like all of the above, but there's a lot to say about that. Because firstly, the percentage-wise is important because, and Simion discusses this in Keys to Soul Evolution again, the importance of this note, that as you get into a lighter frequency, I'm not going to say higher, lighter frequency of thought, higher emotions and higher intended thoughts have a lighter frequency. You can feel it.
Yes.
You feel when you're really, miserable. It's like really dense. It's not, rocket science to figure that out. I mean, maybe rocket science hasn't measured it yet, but we all feel it. So we know it on that level, right?
Yep.
So there's a density in our feelings and in thoughts and emotions. And as we lighten them, we become more powerful creators, because things just, it's basically like the difference between a dense energy is like thinking and creating in mud. And in a lighter energy, you're thinking and creating in the air. Mm-hmm. So if you can try to imagine the two, I mean, one, you think it and you're there. You think and you're in a light frequency and it happens quickly. And if you stay on that note, things just synchronistically pop up and are created. If you're constantly fighting in the mud and living in that dense sensation of thought, then one, you're never going to, you generally don't create what you want. You create something, all right. You're just going to haphazardly hit something. You're going to get the rock in the mud. It might not be what you intended, you see? So your intentions are a lot stronger and more directed when you're thinking on that lighter frequency of energy thought. So those that are on that are much more powerful at creating what they want. You see, and more directed.
So equally as powerful at creating, because we all are equally powerful at creating, but more powerful at creating an intended outcome, what they want.
Yes. And the interesting thing about that, though, is then you can say, well, you can create whatever you want if you're, I'm going to create all this money. But what creates the light energy frequencies are not being totally self-absorbed, because that in itself creates a dense vibe. Okay. So when you get your intentions on a higher level, and that's one of the misconceptions, I think, of the whole secret thing and creating your own reality that we often sort of miss, is that where your intentions of the frequency, because their frequency really is dependent on that intention behind it, that like kind of that level and lightness of that. Like you can want this, one person can want this, two people can want the same thing, same exact thing in their life. But one is coming from a really light, vibrant intention, to be of service to others, to see evolution in humanity or this planet. And the other one is just coming from, I just want to have that because it's going to make me feel better.
It's going to make my neighbor jealous.
Yeah, it's going to make my neighbor jealous, so that's kind of like a dense energy, like, oh, I don't like them and they're not going to like me. And that's really dense.
Yep.
And so it's not about the thing, it's about the intention behind it that actually creates the lighter frequency.
I like that because I'm very much into intention.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it. If everybody listening to this would go to about anything in their daily life, it doesn't matter what the example, and you think towards creating it and change or think about what's behind your reasoning
Your
for
why.
wanting the thing. Your why, right? And think about the why of it, and shift the why. See, first of all, recognize where it's coming from, and if it's coming from a kind of a dense place, shift it and see how it feels, because it really changes the whole vibration of your thoughts and all the energy that you put to it, and it just if you completely lighten up.
Have you become a better conscious creator in your own life over the last few
Oh,
years?
I believe so, yes, for sure. And does it mean that I don't fall lapse a lot and have my emotional breakdowns and whatnot? Yes. But what I really notice, especially since I've taken on what I'm doing right now, I mean, people say, oh, yeah, okay, you got a gift and yeah, you're going to just do it and it comes naturally and you just go for it. No, that's not true at all. Because just because I discovered this purpose and I can do it and I have this gift to do it, doesn't mean that it's easy. And it doesn't mean that I wanted to do it. And it doesn't mean that I don't have to constantly struggle against the ego identity that says something entirely different. But when I get on the vibration of doing it for the intended reason, like I'm sharing this because it uplifts people and it's uplifting humanity and it's helping, and I see how people react to it, it changes everything in me. And then I step out and do things I don't want to do, because my normal ego is one that wants to, stay in the background and be comfortable. Our comfort zone is different for everyone, and the ego wants you to stay in your little comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get into a place of intention, you often have to do things that are outside of your comfort zone. Once you do them for the intended reason, and first of all, when you state the intention, it makes all going out of the comfort zone a lot easier, because suddenly you're like, oh, okay, I'm doing this for enlightenment. I'm doing this for humanity. I'm doing this for others. I'm doing this it's not for me.
I went on the whole
just
journey
step out.
myself doing this.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Step out of my
See,
my
you see
comfort
what I'm
zone.
saying? I mean, you step out of your comfort zone and you do something, and then everything transforms. See, because you might have thought you didn't want to do it and it was going to be tough and not comfortable for me at all. But once you got out there and did it with the intention, whatever it is that your purpose is, things start to happen on a different level, and the fulfillment that comes from that is so beyond what your ego identity and your self-interest was giving you. That gratification, it's a different type of gratification. It's that gratification of being of service and feeling the energy of others elevating and them bringing that back to you, just in the knowing of it. It doesn't mean they're going to give you things and whatnot, just their energy, just the energy of realizing that you've made a difference. And everybody that does that, every one of us that does that, is adding all this energy out into the world, and that's what's creating this change. That's what's uplifting the whole of humanity.
I'm trying to think whether we actually covered that last question though, or did we go off on a tangent?
It's hard not.
Yeah, I'm realizing that we probably went off on a few tangents, and I need to go back a little bit on a few things. You were talking earlier about connecting with other beings apart from the Simion collective, and one of the ones you mentioned was the Syrian felines.
Right.
And I've actually got a book that's also channeled from a feline race, and there's just something very attractive about that whole concept of this race of feline beings. I really feel quite attracted to that. What's been your experience of who they are and where they are and what their connection to us and Earth is?
Okay, lots of big questions. We might not be
Sorry.
able to answer them all, but the ones that I've connected to, I'll start with, they say they're from an eighth or ninth dimensional. But actually, there's others that have come from fifth and sixth. So they kind of, I guess, they span the scope. But the highest ones seem to be like not highest, but the highest number would be a ninth dimensional perspective. Basically, they become less and less physical as you go, and less need for physical. So if you can look at it that way, they say they're from the Sirius star system, and that was where the beings that I'm speaking with say they have evolved. They also do say, however, that or actually others have said about them, to make it more complicated, that there are three types of beings that came to this universe from another universe, and they were felines and birds and reptiles, all in humanoid type of form, I guess. Can't totally answer that one though. But so they evolved and they came from other universe, and they which I think some people call the Lyra universe.
Yep.
And they've said this in such sessions. And they then basically developed on all these various planets in their various own ways. And there's lots of forms of each of those. And I've connected with each type of those beings from various perspectives and various planets and whatnot. The felines were not a being that actually seeded genetically the humans on Earth, like some others, like the reptiles, for example, and some other other beings that actually seeded, like the Zetas and everything, all had something to do with human evolution. And like Pleiadians, for example, which are very human-looking beings, they all had something to do with our genetic development over time at various stages. The felines did not, but they've been involved in our development. And they were big in like Egypt, for example. They came and they gave us a lot of information during that time. And they also gave us the feline animal species that we have on the planet. Apparently, from all the information I'm receiving, pretty much all of the things that we have on this planet came from somewhere else originally.
Yes.
And then evolved in their own ways. They were basically seeded from somewhere else in the universe. And our domestic felines and our wild big cats have that, the genetic seed from these felines, this developed race of felines, which another interesting thing about them that they said was that, like, how we supposedly came from the apes, and we have our fingers and everything look like that. And we part of what science says is that that's how we became, users of tools, and that was a big part of our evolutionary development, is because of our opposing thumbs and whatnot. Well, then you would think, well, what about cats? They don't really have that. And they say that they, instead of evolving the use of tools, they evolved their mental abilities, and their psychic and visualization abilities became more important for them in their evolution. So while they actually became upright, they became masters of using energy, and that's how they created and how they evolved in their worlds, was learning how to use their energy forms, and they become masters at that. And that's still like their specialty, they say. They use sound and color to create things.
So if you have the physical ability to manufacture technology externally, you don't evolve the inner technology. But they did.
They evolved that firstly, and now we're kind of evolving it secondly.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I think that's what our collective. There's a project that I'm involved in, that we have a radio show once a week called the Collective Imagination, and the objective of this is we've got the figure of 3%, to reach 3% of the population, and to get everybody consciously creating together as a collective, and understanding that this is a technology. It's our inherent internal technology, and it sounds like the felines have already well conquered that technology.
Yes, and a lot of these beings, they work a lot in interestingly in different ways. I'm noticing when the information comes through, they have different styles of working collectively. But collective working is a part of pretty much every one of these beings' way of. They recognize that the importance of using individuals' energy in a unit. A lot of people say, they worry about if we become more of a collective beings, that you no longer have individuality, and apparently it's quite the opposite. because they need the individuality in order to make the collective stronger. So you can't lose that individual energy in the thought process,
Well,
or else
I think
you
it
don't
also
have the
gets
strength of
confused. Sorry, we kept talking over each other because
yeah.
it's a bit of a delay. I think it also gets confused with the concept of a hive. You know, that hive mentality
Yes.
where the individual ceases to be
Right.
individual and just becomes an aspect of a hive.
And a lot of that is misunderstood, I think, with the Greys. The Greys is the most, I think, the most misunderstood, at least from the what information that I receive of all the beings that we are involved in. But in a sense, it's kind of interesting because they're reflecting humans, what humans will think and are thinking about an alien race. They're like the guinea pigs of how humans are going to think about having an alien form in their reality.
Well, there's so many different versions of theories on who they are. They're humans from the future. They're um, organic robots. They're
Mm.
from beings from Zeta Reticuli. They're, I mean, who are they? Who are they in your
Yeah.
experience?
Well, interestingly, there's a little bit of truth in every one of those stories,
But there's also so many
which,
different types of them, isn't there? I mean, I had a
yeah, and
discussion with
apparently there
Alfred
are.
Weber who said there
And
was as many as 150 something different grey species that have been identified.
yeah, if you can imagine what would happen if we went out and spread around the universe and lived on different planets, we would evolve differently.
Hmm.
So yeah, and there's like apparently at some point there was the beings that they were that and that did do that. So they have maybe the same origin, but yeah, there's so many different types out there. Apparently, I couldn't begin to be one that can list what other different types are. I haven't had that experience. I'm basically connecting with certain groups of them that are here that want to help us in our evolutionary process, and they talk about what they're why they're involved in genetic manipulation. Some people call it manipulation. They would never call it that. They say they're upgrading, helping us to upgrade. And they're from our next octave up. They're existing in what they call the fourth dimensional perspective, and they're moving on to what they call a fifth dimensional perspective from where they are now. But they're light. They actually still have physical qualities. They're physical beings, but they're lighter. They're lighter frequency energy. So they're not as physical as us. So that's why people, when they experience and they're like, I'm not sure if it's a dream, is this real? Is it? Because they're actually sort of in our next octave where they actually have to kind of what is the word? Not down, but they have to change their energy in order to even appear to us. And they actually prefer, the ones I speak with, they actually prefer to help us to raise our awareness so that we can sort of meet halfway, because they really say it's a difficult thing for them to actually become as dense as we are.
So you said they're misunderstood and that they're here to help, but do you believe
Yeah.
that, I mean, when we look at the whistleblowers from the military and the black ops and all of those, they talk about the
Mm-hmm.
greys that they've come across as being in cahoots with the negative reptilians, and they're part of a negative agenda. Do you think it's possible that there are greys out there that are part of a negative agenda?
I think it's possible. I think it's possible that anything in the universe can get on the level of a negative agenda. But what I think more is what I think more is more likely is that it's the other way around. That it's the human race that's manipulated them,
How
and
so?
that their intentions were actually to be assisting us, and that this is just my perspective. Okay, so
Yeah.
take it or leave it. Because all my experiences with them have been so positive. So I can't. It's really hard for me to even imagine that any of them would have negative intention. But that could be. They could. But and actually even the Roswell incident, the information I received about that was it was a whole test to see how human beings were going to react to them, and they were actually. Since they can see through time and travel through time, they actually looked at all these different probabilities to see how humans would react to that situation, an incident where they were physically experienced on Earth, and what all the various aspects of human nature would come into play, including, of course, and probably most important since of the way our society is the U.S. government, or the governments and the powers that have the ability to actually repress, suppress what actually happens, and then how humans would react to that, and how they would be treated. And I think that a big part of that, what did happen, is that the Zetas were manipulated, and the information about them was manipulated, and that they would think about how our government acts about anything. Everything is a war. Everything is, we're us conquering them, and it's a financial benefit. We need to have more power by finance. So what are we going to get from these little beings that have stepped on our planet? I mean, that's how we react. And I think that they also said that they saw all the different probabilities, and that what happened was set up so that they could begin to enlighten or begin to make us more aware of the existence of other beings in the universe, and to open us up to that possibility. Mm-hmm. So even though there's this really negative reaction that most of us a lot of humans have about that, there are those that are like, wait a minute, are we not alone in the universe? And they started exploring that. And so that incident in itself awakened people to this possibility. Could we actually be physically, communicating or communicated with, or that they're here? And then the whole experience about abduction, that would be another whole topic to discuss. How that's changing, and the perspective of even people that have had the experiences is starting to change because of the heightening awareness of our consciousness as a collective, and being able to see them from a different perspective. Does that have any
that is
meaning
changing
to you?
Yeah, no, I actually did a roundtable discussion specifically about greys, and they deal with. Susan's actually also a contactee, but they're researchers, and the whole way of thinking amongst the people that they're dealing with and their own experiences has changed from being one of terror to seeing, once the person having the experience gets past the fear,
right,
that they actually are starting to have positive experiences. And I personally just took it all with a grain of salt and held my, reserved my judgment on that one. But since having that discussion, I'm finding more and more people who are in a position like yourself, first-hand experience, who are saying the same thing now. That they believe that the ETs are actually, these greys are our friends, that they have our best interest at heart, and they are here to help us, and that these contacts are positive. It's just we've got to get past the fear, because it makes us interpret the experience a certain way.
Right. And it's natural. I mean, you can't blame these people, or you can't, and you can see logically why of course they're going to be afraid. It's something that's completely unknown and out of their, box of reality. So that is a natural reaction. And the interesting thing, though, is my experience with receiving from these beings is that they don't know that energy of fear and what we might call a hate, or judging the other, like this dislike. They don't have that. They don't even experience it. So they're just observing that we're experiencing, and they're trying to help us to move out of that. They understand that we have it. And people always are saying, well, they don't have any emotions. They're just emotionless and cold, and they don't have any expression on their face. And first of all, I don't think you'd find one person that's had experience with these beings that doesn't say they've communicated with them telepathically. Right? if they communicate telepathically, why do they need and why would they? And they've said this. So we don't need to have facial expressions. We don't need to show fear. We don't need to show anger. We know where we know the emotions of each other. We feel our energy. We feel our frequency and the vibration that we're relaying. We sense that energy of the emotions. And they've learned, actually, they say to me that they've learned to keep their emotions on a higher frequency, because they've learned that it's, doesn't do them any justice to stay in that dense energy.
But how do they respond when they see someone else, when they see what they're doing to a human being is causing that human being a great deal of fear and stress? Do they not? How do they respond to that?
Well, I think you'll find and I haven't read all the research on everybody that's had abduction experiences by any means, but often they'll say that they put me out, or they stop me from remembering, or they make me feel something. Like if they make me, they'll say it's all okay, and they make me feel okay. They say they either numb them or whatever, but they try to console. Mm-hmm. and release this person from that energy, but they also recognize that person has to change that in themselves, and that's part of what they're trying to help us do, because they have to shift from the fear energy and that feeling like they're being a victim, and shift that. Mm-hmm. And also you'll probably, I think that a lot of them, if some of the abduction, at least experiencers have stated that once they actually say, no, I don't want this experience, then they don't come back. Or that once they have actually acknowledged that they have the choice, then they can have that choice.
Okay.
And a lot of them would then change their mind and say, wait a minute, once they get to that level of deciding, and knowing that they can decide, they decide, you know what, wait a minute. They want to know more about this experience, and they realize that it's different than they thought it was. And I'll just leave it at that, because I don't want to speak for the people that have had that experience. So,
yeah, understood. And let's just because we are now well into August, and there's only a few months left of this much anticipated year. So what are they telling you in regards to what to expect in earth changes wise? And are earth changes necessary? Do they need to be dramatic? Is that all up to us?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the big question, and it is up to us, apparently, hugely. And now the earth is a conscious being as well, and so obviously she has a perspective on that too.
Well, exactly. So how much can we influence her?
Yeah, well, we can influence her quite a lot, because we ease her transition by keeping our consciousness in a place where we are supportive of her energy. You see, so if we make it easier we can make it easier for her, and we have been. I think there's a lot of things that have been diverted because of the energy of light workers, and their constant efforts to get these intentions high, and to at least have the consciousness to care enough about the planet herself as a being, that energy helps in her transition to her next level, which is what's happening. So but then again, there might be still some aches and pains that she needs to release, and build up of energy that needs to come forth, and changes in that. I mean, the changes on the planet's climate are happening.
Absolutely.
Just because that's kind of undeniable, I think, and that's her basically shifting in her skin, just like we are. We're going through our own disturbances because of our challenging ourselves as to what it is we're creating. And so there's growing pains there. So I think it's a combination of how we affect her, and what she's experiencing, and how much she feels she needs to shift on a planetary level, and also what we individually experience depends on where we are coming from. So, whether you're actually in the place of a disaster may relate to where your consciousness is. Now, that doesn't mean that, oh, I'm in the disaster, therefore I've been negative and I'm horrible. It might be you might be there to actually help. So it's, and that you're attracted to it because you needed to be there to help with the energy of the situation. So there's a lot of that going on, and a lot of more consciousness about that on the planet. And even though if you look on the news, it doesn't appear like there's much consciousness happening at all. I don't watch news personally. I get my news independently, and I seek it as I need it. But I don't recommend watching, primetime television news necessarily. Or if you do, watch it with a real grain of salt, and consider the sources and consider how there's so much of reality that's not there. So and probably you're only getting like a small percentage of what really happened. Just considering that every human being has a different perspective in itself lets you know that it can't possibly be all encompassing of whatever experience they're reporting,
no,
so to speak, or whatever news. Firstly, just given that, but take it to another level and understand that there's so many pressures on the media to say and be certain ways that you're not getting much of the real story, and certainly not getting the story about the underlying energy of all these light workers on Earth today, that human beings that care and are putting forth huge efforts. Yourself, people that are getting out there and getting outside the box and sharing information that would normally you never hear about. It's all going on. It's this huge undercurrent. And as soon as you start, putting your mind into looking in that direction, you see it all over the place. You see this amazing energy of people helping and people being and pushing the boundaries on what's so-called real, and understanding that actually there is no real world.
That's a whole big conversation.
That's the whole yeah. Because all of it is based on what we believe and what we think. We're creating it. There is no, oh, but this is real. You create, and so whatever you decide to believe, that's what these beings are trying to teach us. They're saying, they're like, duh, don't you know that really, actually, none of it's real? Hello? It's all an illusion. What do you want it to be? That's what they keep telling us. What do you want it to be? Why not create it? So by thinking constantly about, the Illuminati overpowering you and controlling your life, think about you being in control and what do you really want, and just create it. Obsessing about the powers against us is only empowering the powers against us.
Absolutely.
Because you're creating that belief in them. And you're adding to this volume of energy of thoughts that creates that as well.
So what about, have they given you any insight into what the mass animal deaths around the planet are about?
Yeah, they've said, I did a channeling, on that in particular, when there was all those birds that were falling out of the sky, and people were asking about that. And they're saying that there's a couple things happening. One is that these beings are ready to shift. They're ready to go into their next level, and they're departing the planet in large numbers because of it. They already, the animal species have their own evolution and their own energetic process. So it's not the same as us, and it may be a different level of awareness as us, but that doesn't mean it's lesser or anything. And in some senses, they're more aware of than we are of their connection with everything and their connection with the planet. And they're they feel a different vibration of what's going on the planet than we do. And they're aware of it. They're aware of this shifting energy, and they're choosing to leave what they see as sort of a unsettled state of the planet right now. And they're moving on, which is interesting. I mean, that's one perspective on it. There's also the perspective that we're seeing the patterns change on the planet. And that's period. So, and you can look at it from the soul energy of the animals actually knowing and deciding. And they're also knowing and deciding and to be an example to us of what's happening on the planet, to wake us up. They're actually volunteering in a sense to say, hey, look, something's wrong here. Yeah, you can argue
is something wrong or is something right? If the
yeah, that's the question. Is something right? I think it's a little bit of both, actually. And then again, it goes back to that belief. Okay, what is wrong and what is right? There is no such thing. It's just, what do we want to see? Do we want to see a world without any animals, where it's pretty much concrete and nothing can really survive?
No, I don't think anybody does.
Is it wrong? And these beings say there's no such thing as wrong. It's a matter of, do you want to create it or not? And the planet herself apparently doesn't want to create that, because she's not. I think she has her own creation process that we're a part of. And so we're either we can be in support of what her creative process is, or we can, be against what her creative process is. And we're all connected. So any way you look at it, there's going to be a fusion of all the consciousness that's involved in this planet.
Well, I was going to ask you that about the collective consciousness groups of all the different species on this planet. I mean, surely they've all got a say in what's going on here too. Potentially, if not equal to them, even more so. Maybe because they're even more connected to the planet than we tend to be.
Right.
Or is it I don't know, do we all have an equal say? Do the ants have as much of a say as we do? Do we have less of a say than the dolphins? I mean, do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
I don't know. And ultimately, is it all come down to the planet anyway?
Well, considering, these beings that I connect with are always talking about how the interconnectedness of everything. And I often see, like, when Simion comes through, I see what they see in my kind of mind's vision. I get a glimpse, and I see the light energy between everything, like fibers of light. And when you think of someone, you intensify that light beam to them. And they see they see the universe that way. That's it for them. They understand that. And they understand when you see that you're giving light to things, then it all brightens up. You have a very different perspective on what you're doing with one another and your understanding of one another. They don't see it as separate. The way we see each other, all the animals, as separate. They see it all as pieces of a beautiful, like, dance of energy and consciousness. And they actually talk often about connecting with the consciousness of what we consider to be separate from us in the world. But that even the consciousness of rocks and plants and animals and the sun, and all of it has energy that we can connect with through our consciousness and communicate with it on a different level than we do. And they talk about connecting with, like, the molecules of the chair you're sitting on, and communing with these molecules and that the consciousness of that to create things mutually. And this is a concept that it's really hard, I think, for most people to understand. But when you've experienced it, even a little glimpse like I have just from receiving from these beings, you really start to think of everything differently, and seeing or beginning to recognize that these beings see everything that way.
It sounds
and
so
that they have
beautiful. It's just such a beautiful visual,
isn't it? And then feeling it just takes it to a whole nother level. And I actually, one time I channeled. I've channeled a couple of times, but one experience I had with channeling Archangel Uriel. And that was a great experience. And then also feline Syrians came through after them, which was a whole nother experience I could tell you.
Nice.
But it was just, yeah. But they somebody asked about the Zohar, which is it's apparently channeled book about the Bible. The Kabbalists refer to it often, and it's called the Zohar. And it was on the table, and we were in a forest actually, and it was just this little camping table, and they asked about the book and the energy and whether it had energy, they spoke about it, and they said this book has so much light. Every letter in the book has light, and I saw it. I saw this beam of light coming from the book. And they said it's not just the book; it's all the energy that's been put into it. It's all the energy of every letter and every word, and the meaning behind it, and all of the people that have studied it and the energy that they put into it. And you could see it; it radiated. And then they said, in contrast to the table. And I saw like this dull energy of the table. And the table, they said, was built out of, greed, and it wasn't manufactured with pride, something that wasn't meant to last. And the resources weren't considered. So you could feel it. And I just felt this just density. And it almost was like shameful. And it was dark. It didn't have any light. It was just absence of light.
So does that actually become the consciousness of the table, as like the table sitting there feeling shameful?
It's the actual table. The table is because that's what's put into it, the energy that has been put into creating it. And it has consciousness. And you can shift that. You can help it shift, or you can shift it by loving it, by caring for it, by, giving it a light of your own consciousness. And that's what they say. You can transfer your light. You can transfer this energy between things, and because you're all connected. And so by appreciating it, you're actually shifting that energy of the molecules of consciousness because
everything is of this poor little shameful table.
I know.
Transformed.
I have to say. So
that's great.
And I've seen other people that have actually a friend of mine did an exercise where they were connecting with objects. They were to bring an object in, and it was a little class about connecting with. And I think it was great, awesome idea. And they were trying to communicate with the consciousness of the thing. And this person had a cup. And she said, oh my God, everybody was talking about this great feeling of the consciousness of the thing. And she said, oh my God, my cup is so, it's just miserable. It's so unhappy. I don't know what. Somebody else, she had found it on the way to this class. Came from someone else in the class, said that they threw it away and they never liked it. That there was a couple or something, and that it had been given to them by an in-law or something, and they never liked it. And they used it for things like, paint brushes in, and they just kind of put it in the back shelf. And finally, they threw it away, and this girl found it.
How funny!
It's also somebody who's had that. Actually experienced and confirmation right there on the spot of this, why they were feeling that.
You were reminding me of something that I hadn't thought of in a very long time. I was in a pub many years ago, and a guy sat next to me, and he just looked at me and he said, "You know how to feel things, don't you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, and he just handed me this ring, and he said, "What does this ring tell you?" And within 10 seconds I felt like I was choking, and I gave it back to him, and I said, "That's not a very happy ring." I said, "What's going on with the person who wears that ring?" And I just went on this whole tangent about whoever wears the ring has no voice and can't express themselves. And he just looked at me like, "Okay, you're a freak," and got up and walked out. I haven't thought about that for a really long time, but the sensation was really, really strong.
Wow.
But that wasn't about the ring itself, I guess. It was about the person wearing it.
Right, right. But the thing holds the energy of the person wearing. I mean, that's why, psychic people who are able to do that with an object, they're feeling the energy that's been put into that object. Because everything holds that energy and has consciousness. And that's what this information I receive they say in so many different ways.
You can't look at anything the same again.
Yeah. And if we could just, we go about our everyday life and we'll forget this. But if we can once in a while stop and think about how we're affecting everything in our environment, and that every thought is giving and can be giving, or every thought can be giving, or it can be taking away energy, or just not giving. Because basically what these beings also say is that it's this cycle of energy. When you give, you're receiving, and you have in order to actually you actually need to be both a giver and a receiver, because if you're not receiving, then nothing can be giving to you. You understand what I'm saying? So it's a cycle of the energy of giving and receiving, and when there's that constant cycle and it's being,
the more you give, the
energy
more you get.
is being given, the more you're getting back, and the more you're just raising the vibration of everything around you. It's like it's just creating vibrancy. If you're holding back, and holding back means not just not giving, but also not receiving, then you're blocking that flow. And when they say when the flow is there, everything is rejuvenated. And where we could be in a state of constant rejuvenation and not have to feel like we are always constantly needing to take from each other, because that is like the opposite of what I'm saying. Because if you're feeling like you don't have enough and you need to constantly grab energy from others, then you're stopping that cycle and you're not rejuvenating yourself and the world.
Speaking of rejuvenating, our physical bodies, I mean, there's a lot of talk about our DNA at the moment and the switching on of latent abilities. Do you see, or have you been told anything in regards to what's going to happen to our physicality? Are we going to be able to, I mean, everyone wants to live longer and look younger, but anything beyond that?
Well, they speak a lot about how we really can heal ourselves, and even doing visualizations to regenerate your cells just by infusing them with light. Even that visualization is adding to your cells, believe it or not. That we are supposed to be able to completely heal ourselves, and as we move into this lighter frequency, we'll actually be able to choose our physical form. If we want a physical form that looks older because we feel wise and we want to present that, we can present that. If we want to present a image of youth and vitality, and we can do that. So, but once you're at that level of awareness, you're not thinking the egotistically like we do and impressing the neighbor. It becomes an energetic expression of who we are, and that's where we're going. That's where many of these beings, once they've evolved out of a certain level, they say, well, this is what we evolved from, and this is so if you see us, we kind of take this form, like the feline form of these beings are beyond having to need a form yet anymore. But they'll appear that way, and they'll appear in a way that they feel represents their energy. And often it has to do with color and sound, and like just a very different level of what appearance than we think of.
But are we talking about you and me, or are we talking about in generations to come?
Well, they're saying this is possible right now, and in some levels, I guess we kind of do it, but very consciously. But so, when we're feeling really down, we kind of look really grumpy and maybe might not be looking our best. Take it to another level of actually changing your cellular structure and being able to morph yourself into looking a certain way. That's where we're supposed to be going in this next level of reality.
So I could be blue and have big wings, or
if
I wanted to.
There are blue beings out there with wings too.
Okay, I don't want to put you on the spot here, and so by all means say whatever feels right. But I just wanted to give people a glimpse of what it might look like, because this is a service that you offer. to connect with their guides. And because so many people are, I know that there's a lot of people who are stuck, you know, and they want to have experiences, and then they're not having ones that meet their desires or expectations. They want to connect with their higher self. They want to connect with their guides. They may even want to channel. You know, they're just not. It's not happening for them. And so, going through an intermediary like yourself is, you know, the only option they have at this stage, and what that experience might look like.
Okay. Well,
are you up for doing something like that?
Firstly, it's what's that?
Are you up for capable or up for doing something like that?
You mean connecting right now?
Yeah.
And experiencing that?
Yeah.
Well, and for an individual guy, it would have to be I prefer to do it on an individual basis and not publicly.
Yeah, right, sure.
Like for you, if I was to connect with your guy, because it is really personal, and a lot of things might come up that maybe you didn't really want to share, or just you're not ready to understand, you want to process it. I can tell you that it is eye-opening for most people, and to me, a lot of it makes no sense when I just take a photograph. I get a photograph of them, and they give me some basic information, which I don't really pay much attention to. It's just that it connects me with who they are, so that I can feel comfortable. I focus on them, and their guide comes through, whoever that is, and their guide comes through, and wherever they're from, and they give their name, and I just sit most of the time. I either do it auditorially, and I just relay it by voice on a recorder in the computer directly, not editing or anything. I just speak, or I just type it, and they just tell the story. And to me, when it's done, I'm like, wow, this. A lot of times I'm like, they're not going to believe this is crazy, or you know, who knows? I stopped trying to judge it. Because I can't, you know, that's another thing when you're receiving information. You can't, if you start judging, you can't judge it because you're just going to interfere with it. And so I've had to learn, of course, to get out of my own way when receiving, and then getting out of my own way when sending it to the person, because sometimes I wonder how they're going to receive it, because I have no idea. And that what comes back is just fascinating, and it seems to have the effect of opening something in people. It like triggers something. To me, it means nothing. To them, they're like, oh my God, I felt so resonant with that name, or, you know, let me tell you this story about when I was a kid and I had this experience, because it just totally relates to what I just gave them, the information. So somehow it connects something and triggers something in them. Because people that have had these sessions are having awakenings. I'm hearing it second and third and even fourth hand. I have one friend who introduces everyone to my sessions because she sees what it's doing to them, and she tells me, oh, you should see, you know, so and so, and I oftentimes I give them a name, or the being gives them a name that is their soul name, and they, for some reason, it just so resonates with them, and they take it on. Many of these people are taking on that name and using that name in their life, and it's like changing their whole experience of reality in some way, each in their own. So it has this profound connection. Now, whether they're going to be able to communicate the way I do, not necessarily the same way, but oftentimes the being will give them a chance, a method, or a symbolism, or something that will help them to connect to them. And it's pretty much different for every being. Sometimes it's similar for types of beings like Arcturians that are really into geometry and sacred geometry images and whatnot, and so often they'll give something related to that, but
they give them the tools to make their own connection.
They give them some tools to start focusing their consciousness in the direction of thinking multidimensionally or outside of their normal thought patterns, so that they can start making that themselves. You know, not everybody's meant to be like I am, to receive and translate all this information, but everyone is a channel for some energy in some way. So oftentimes it's art or music or gather people have gifts of gathering other people together. I mean, it could be many things, science, gifts that we have are focuses that are our ability. Yours is obviously to bring this information out of others and help them to share and to share it with you have obviously an incredible gift of communicating and sharing that. So it's different for everyone. And oftentimes the soul has this inclination throughout many lifetimes, throughout many galaxies in some cases. So that's what the perspective comes from, what their a little bit higher perspective of their soul purpose, from our multidimensional view. And people ask, individual questions and everything, and they answer them, and just answer them in a way that is really often so profound and different for everyone. It's really an interesting experience. It's interesting for me too, and I just, I don't always have time to really delve into to reading it and studying it, because I'm doing so many other millions of things. So I just send it off, and then I read it. Somebody will come back to me and tell me how profound this is in their life, and then I'll go back and read it, and I'll be like, wow, that is really fascinating. That's really interesting. I can't believe they said that. And because it's so different every time, the perspective. Mm-hmm. What I would like to do is, and I wonder if we shouldn't actually reschedule to do this, because it might, I'm feeling like I've exhausted my voice.
Oh, sure.
Talking so much and all that. And but maybe we could actually reschedule a time to do just the channeling session, and we can just focus on that.
Great.
And I can have Simion and maybe a couple of other beings, since you have an interest in the felines. Maybe we could ask the felines to come through. Or maybe you can ask your listeners if who they'd like to hear from, and we can do it that way, and then do a whole session. I won't do much talking, and we'll just go right into them. And how does that sound?
That sounds great. I'd love to do that. Okay. And I'll actually put it out there that perhaps the listeners can forward some questions.
Yes, that would be great.
Oh,
and I'm connecting with ascended masters, and so if whatever there's most interest in, we could.
Well, actually, that's a question in itself, the ascended masters thing, because for me, there's a lot of controversy around ascended masters. Who are they in your view?
Well, what that's come through for me is that the ascended masters are beings that originated, I can't say originally because some of them haven't, or that were very involved in planet Earth and evolved their awareness as human beings on planet Earth to what we call an ascended state of mind. So oftentimes they'll be up to the point of, say, what we say is to be a fifth dimensional perspective, which is that love consciousness, highest vibration of what humans have been able to accomplish while incarnated in human form in 3D. And they're masters that have done that while living as humans, have mastered their awareness to be at that level of consciousness, and then at that point generally will share in some way or another with others. And will come back and do it again, and have come back and done it again in various physical forms once they've reached this level of awareness. That's maybe a crude way of looking at it. I don't know, but that's kind of the perspective I get on them. They're masters, human masters, evolved within a being human into a higher level of awareness, and then have come back to share it, and do so either from another, from where they are now in that higher awareness as a soul, or have reincarnated into humans in various times in history to make a certain impact, like major religious figures generally, or saints, or others that we consider to be masters of some level or another of spiritual consciousness.
Have many of them reincarnated on the planet at the moment? Are there any of them here now?
I presume so, but I don't. That's a really good question, and maybe not one for me to answer. Actually, I was trying to think if there's any information I received about that. I have received information about John the Baptist is incarnated into, I think, and I have to go back and look at the notes on that, into like 4 different people, or 3 or 4 different people. That's the other thing. They don't necessarily go into one form, especially these days. I think they're trying to diversify the impact.
Well, see, that brings
especially
up
the way our
a whole other discussion about fragmentation,
yeah,
soul fragmentation, and that
yes, it does.
why there are so many beings on the planet right now is that we've just been fragmenting and fragmenting, and that there could be a dozen of me on the planet right now, and
Yes.
that a lot of the things like the suicide rate's gone up, murder rates are going
Mm.
up, accidents that take out multiples of people, large groups of people, natural disasters, is because some of these fragmentations are, how can I put this?
Joining.
Yeah, it's like one of the beings, one of the vessels, is
Hmm.
is
Yes,
is
that's
capable of
got it.
holding more of the soul than these
Mm.
other ones. So the ones that are holding less are actually dying off and rejoining the whole.
Yeah, that sounds pretty accurate, I'd say. I think there's something to that, what you're saying, for sure.
Yeah, it's one of my working
And I
hypotheses at the moment.
yeah, that's really, I think that's a really powerful thing that you just said, and I think that makes sense from information I've received. I haven't asked that directly, but yeah, that one, that there's so many of us because we have fragmented, because we are trying to extend the influence or the possibilities, so to speak.
Hmm.
But yeah, there's this unification. I've done sessions for someone, like, for example, who's passed away, who recently passed away, and I connected with their soul, which was really interesting. And I don't do a lot of, like, people that passed away. That's not really mostly what I connect with, but have. But this person their soul had made the decision that they couldn't accomplish what they needed to do in the body that they were in the way that their life was going.
Mm.
So it made a decision, and person was fairly young, and made the decision that, okay, well, you know what, I'm not going to complete the mission. I need to just get off right now. And their choice was then to help others from, the spiritual side of things, to do something, related to the mission, to their mission, but from the other side. And I've also had, I've connected with soul mates on the other side. What they said was basically, I'm your other half, and I'm here supporting you on this side, and that you're never going to meet somebody like me, because when you leave here, we're going to join again and do what we need to do. So that's happened also. But they also pretty much say that the idea of soulmates, our concept of soulmates, is kind of limited, the way we think about it, as there's this one soul that because we have soul groups, and we have fragmented aspects, and we have parts of ourselves on other planets, and we so it's so much more complicated, really, than that. It's not as simple as we have one aspect that is somewhere else.
What about
Speaking.
twin flames? What do you think that is?
And I have received information from somebody who asked about that, and they said, yeah, we're here to, this person is your twin flame, and they're meant to, I don't want to say challenge, isn't really the right word. There's a lot of us that are meant to challenge each other on lots of levels that aren't necessarily what you'd call a twin flame. But there's like this greater potential there that these souls have in coming together. But if their intentions aren't there to where the mission was, then it's going to be constant conflict. That it's almost like a supernova thing. If they get together and they are meant to, if they do the mission that they're supposed to come, then it's really powerful. But if they can't do it, then if they're not with that intention, then it's constant challenge.
And do you think twin flames?
But I don't know.
Do you think twin flames are necessarily a male-female couple, or a male-male couple for that matter?
Incarnate is anything. It could be male-male. It could be friends. It could be,
You're not necessarily meant to be lovers or romantically involved.
That's not the impression I get. And any soulmate idea of, when they say a soulmate, they say, well, a soulmate for them, and the way they relate to it, is that you had an intention to come together and do something. Sometimes it's just really something quick, like you meet somebody and they send you a message, and that's it. That's one level of soulmate. And that person you have had many, many lives with on a deep, intimacy. And this time they're just here to send you this one message, or just to change your track. Or, sometimes it's someone agrees that they're going to be your nemesis in this life. And that's actually, they're doing the most service of anybody, of all the souls you come in contact. This nemesis loves you the most, that has the most deepest connection with you. Because that is the hardest role to take on.
It causes you the most drama.
Yeah. So, that, and then there's the whole topic of karma, because so many of these beings are also saying what we're supposed to be doing right now is getting off the wheel of karma. That we've been stuck in these patterns of revenge, and I'm going to do this in this life, and then you're going to do that to me in that life. We're going to get back at each other. We're each going to experience every aspect of what it's like to be, experiencing one angle or another. And they're saying that it's time to let go of that we no longer need to be on this wheel of revenge or experiences bouncing back and forth, positive, negative, or whatever you may call it, just different. That it's time for us to elevate out of that. And that's part of this whole cycle of elevating our awareness so that we don't need to be in a place of experiencing that polarity, that bad and good and right and wrong. And
so every time you act reactionary, you react rather than consciously respond, you're creating more karma.
Yeah, you're bringing yourself back into that wheel of having to rebalance. It's all about this balancing act of keeping the energy in one place or another. They were shifting it from one place to another. They're saying what we need to recognize is that you don't need to do that. That you can be outside of that wheel and perceive. And the way you do that is elevating your awareness to and your emotional level in recognizing that everybody is connected. It's all connected. All of this is connected. So when you do that, you forgive. So you're in a state of forgiveness. You wouldn't be resentful, or because you know that your love, that's you in another other perspective. And you're all connected.
This is also tapping into
the wheel dissipates. The wheel goes by. You no longer have to get back at that person anymore.
Yeah, of course.
So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was just saying, this is sort of also tapping into the talk around the must-dos and the have-to-dos in order to go through this ascension process. Lots of dogma, depending on who you talk to. You have to get rid of your karma or you won't go through. You have to activate a particular Merkaba or you'll end up in oblivion, or you'll have to do... And it can get very dogmatic, and I think people get a little bit apprehensive about, am I doing it right? Am I assuring my ascension? Am I supporting the people around me to ensure their ascension? Am I going down the right path, essentially? I don't think there's any hard and fast rules, personally, other than what we've talked about. Being conscious of your thoughts, raising your level of awareness to seeing the interconnectedness of everything. Responding from your heart, those sort of things. To me, that's enough to try and stay on top of.
That's enough to keep you busy. Yeah. Well, what Simion says about that is, if a method or a religion or an association helps you to do basically what you're saying, it's all about that intention and that consciousness. So it doesn't matter what methods you use to get there, and it's okay if you use methods. If something works for you, do it. If a belief system's helping you, just understand that that's what it is.
Yeah, it's
a belief system that you're using as a tool, or a methodology. So there's nothing wrong with any of it, but none of it is right and none of it's wrong. It's what you choose to work for you.
So it's not necessarily, I'll just use a Merkaba as an example. It's not necessarily the Merkaba itself that's doing the job. It's the belief and the feeling that you get from going through the process of acting one, and how that raises your vibration. This is actually the bottom line.
Yes, except that I'm going to, I hope not contradict that. But
no, if you do, you do. That's okay.
It seems like there's always like, what I've also noticed with all these beings is everything is a dichotomy. And there's always, well, there's this side, but if you switch it around, it's this perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But that isn't really one of those cases, but it's just to say that there a lot of these beings, like Arcturians, for example, do speak a lot about the power of geometry. And okay, is that a belief? Yes. If you believe that the consciousness is ruling, then yeah, you're using that as a tool, just like we just said. But that they discuss that everything in the universe is created, or our world is created out of this use of geometry as an energetic creation form, and that they use geometrical forms in order to travel, and to travel through space and travel through time. So have they evolved with that consciousness, and therefore that belief, therefore that works for them as beings? And according to what the fundamental answer is from most of these more aware beings, is that would be the case, that they evolved with that method, and therefore that's been created as their reality. Because all of this is a creative creation process, see?
Well, that doesn't actually contradict that, I don't think.
Because, so I guess it doesn't.
Yeah, and then you look at, say, the felines who have concentrated on perhaps a different tool, mm-hmm. but end up with the same result in terms of their own. I mean, what the ultimate result is, a higher level of awareness.
Right. And the ultimate answer to all of it still stems from that belief and understanding of the power of consciousness. So no matter what the method is, that is the underlying core that remains the same.
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you. And I know that your voice is starting to go on you, so I don't want to tire you out too much. But absolutely enjoyed it, and would love to set up another one where we can speak directly to the Simion Collective or whoever else wants to pop in for a chat.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll organise that. I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay, yeah, and then we'll just present it as that and that alone. And so now everybody's heard my perspective. They know where I'm coming from. And now let's hear from those that have something. Well, we'll see. We'll see what comes through. You know, that's another funny thing about doing this is that I go to do presentations where I'm channeling or receiving and telepathically relaying, whatever you want to call it. And I'm like the only presenter that I have no idea what I'm about to say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what my presentation is going to be about. And sometimes I don't even know who's going to come through. Sometimes I'll get glimpses ahead of time. Oh, here's what the topic is. And I think they do that just to make me feel better about it. So I don't feel like I'm going in there so blind as to what I'm going to say. But it is kind of a funny feeling not to know. But it's also enjoyable in the sense that, well, it's a mystery to me too.
But it is something that's it's on call. It's at will. I mean, I'm just wondering whether you've ever been presented or, you know, say booked to present to an audience in order to communicate with the Simion Collective, and they don't show up, but maybe somebody else does.
Yeah, well, they'll show up if I ask, and I sort of do, you know, I'll say, okay, well, we're going to do Simion. Like, I did Roswell recently at the UFO museum there, and so I asked, you know, I said, my presentation will be with ETs, and it was one of last year, not this one, I did it last year also, but that was my first time actually publicly channeling ETs. I just said, you know, it's an ET thing. I mean, it's about UFOs. I should probably, you know, ask those guys to come in. And I just left it to them, and several different beings came. In fact, there was a lineup of them that wanted to come, and some people in the audience actually could see that. And I felt it. I was like, well, I don't know who's going to come in next. And it was odd for me because I wasn't sure, you know, and who wanted it. I knew that there was these different types of beings that I've channeled before. And this person said they could see the energy or the actual form of the being waiting to be next. And then I felt they were deciding. They were actually deciding. So there was like a pause, and then it was decided. And then I just felt them and their name, and they came through. But it's a conscious in the sense that I'm asking to receive, and I always ask, you know, for the highest possible being, for everybody concerned there, you know, and have that intention And even though it's a very simple process, and I just put myself into a relaxed state and ask, and they pretty much come, I always put that intention and imagine white light, and I have my little ritual that I do for me.
I'm still working through the book, Keys to Soul Evolution, but is there any information in there that gives people tools for how to do this themselves?
It's sort of spread throughout.
Mm-hmm.
They sort of give you keys and hints, and it really is not particularly to say that, oh, here's how you should, become a channel and telepathic relayer, because that's not everybody's mission. What they do discuss is how to connect with what your mission is, and to get in that place of intention and to recognize that you actually have that you did come with that intention to have a specific purpose, and and to recognize when it does come to you, to act on it, to make a decision to be it. And that's not always easy, because even if you get information of, I'm supposed to do this, it doesn't mean you're going to act on it. It's a choice that each person has to make. And so they try to give us the tools to think first differently than we're thinking, because that really is the step that is required for us to then move into whatever the energy that we're supposed to be channeling into this world to help at this time on our human evolution.
I'm imagining that you're quite positive about where we're going. And how do you feel when I know you don't watch news or necessarily watch mainstream television, but how do you feel? Because I'm feeling this complete disconnect. When I see, I only have to be on Facebook for 5 minutes and I'm bombarded with, the latest atrocities in the world. And I feel this sense of compassion and sadness, but at the same time now there's this disconnect. And at first it was quite disconcerting. It was like, what, don't I care anymore? And it was like, no, it's not that. I do care, but it's not it's not my reality anymore. It's like watching a scary movie that I know I can get up and walk away from, or something.
I think that's a great that you're saying that, because I think that is an example of how this shift is happening. People think that it's going to be some big event, and it's actually exactly what you're saying. It's your reality is shifting into something else, and you're feeling it. You're disconnecting with that, and you're feeling your own reality, and you're creating something new. And doing that by disassociating and feeling that disassociation, that disassociation is real, and I'm feeling the same thing. So I can confirm what you're saying exactly. I feel no need to associate, and it almost like it's not the reality anymore. And and I don't feel guilty about it. I don't feel I just know that every thought that we have and putting into something new is what's creating it. And I'm so sure of it. Probably because I've been receiving so much of this information telepathically from new beings. But I think it's beyond that. I think I'm actually feeling the energy of the new creation. And I think that's what you're feeling also. And the more we don't allow ourselves to get sucked into that world, the better. And we're feeling the energy of that's urging us not to do that, I think. More strongly.
More strongly. I mean, I get approached all the time about who to interview. And there's a lot of people who want me to interview the more, say, cabal-related information or whistleblower sort of stuff that's very, kind of dark, and I don't want to go there. I've got no interest in having that conversation, because part of me, this is quite a selfish road that I'm on, because what I'm doing is I'm getting to have really great conversations with people who have information that resonates with me. And occasionally I'll step out of that to do an interview with someone, simply because there seems to be a big demand for that information, but it's not necessarily what I'm resonating with. And I'm doing that less and less and less, and talking more and more to people like yourself. And because that just, like I said, it's just not, I'm not there. That's just not my
Mm-hmm.
world. I don't feel like it's where I'm going. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that I hadn't put it so much the way you just did with resonating with the new. I just
Mm-hmm.
felt the disconnect with the old. But as soon
Right.
as you put it in those words, yeah, I felt something.
Well, I think
They
they
go
go
hand in
hand in hand.
hand, but
Yeah.
I think I had to disconnect from the one before I really connected with the other or something. I don't know. But it's been an interesting ride, yeah, and I've seen that happen in stages. You know, it started with finally letting go of the idea that it was my job to save everybody, and this mission I was on to save the world. I let that go, and and went through the same process. Have I lost my compassion? Have I lost my, no, it's not that. I just was able to see the and respect the journey that each individual was on, and that it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
my job or my responsibility, or even I didn't have the right to interfere with that. Um, and just watching it all happen in stages over the last 12 months in particular has been really, really interesting. But
Well, I think it's a good sign.
yeah, thanks. It feels a hell of a lot better, I can tell you,
Well, that says everything, doesn't it?
doesn't it? Well,
Mm-hmm.
thank you again, Amariah, and we will get together very, very soon and speak to some of
Okay.
your friends.
Yes. Let's let them do all talking from now on.
Okay, thank you again.
Keep thinking those good thoughts. All right. Bye bye.
Will do. Bye bye for now.